for debugging, whereas the other example I just did was about something that wasn't working, and it wasn't about typos. It was just about a bug that was introduced by some code that was written that executed fine, but just wasn't doing the right thing. So there's a category of bugs like that, where they're just like unintended consequences or unintended return values, but the code still works. This situation is probably like that as well, but I can already see some typos and some bugs. So there are going to be some just errors that get thrown by the Ruby interpreter when it tries to evaluate everything. So I'll get there in a second, but on the left-hand side, just let's try and figure out what we're trying to do. So essentially, this is a Celsius converter. Interestingly, I learned this as a child, 9/5 C plus 32. So when I go from Celsius to Fahrenheit, this is the way around. This is trying to go from Fahrenheit to Celsius. 9/5 C. So a cheat way I remember doing this as a kid was doubling, take off 10% and adding 32. So for example, 20 degrees Celsius would be 40 minus 10%, which is 4, which is 36. Add 32 is 68. So that's a quick little tip. Anyway, so we have an equation to get Celsius from Fahrenheit. We have some code. So the first thing we do is just run the test, see what's going on. Line 4, syntax error. Okay. So it's not quite line 4, but it's just saying here, it's been like, I don't know what this is. So this is clearly someone trying hard to try and introduce bugs, because this wouldn't really happen in normal programming once people know Ruby, but it's a good practice. So I assume the intention here is to store in a local variable the return value of calling this method convert to Celsius, which is not correctly named. So I'm going to just make sure that they're named the same thing, and then double check the syntax. So I can already start fixing a load of things. I can see lots of errors here, typos, but I'm just going to not worry about it just yet, and just let the tests reveal what the next thing to change is. Because it will also help me go through the order of code, the logical execution of code that's happening. So I'm going to go test this and just keep testing. So undefined local variable method temperature for main object. So where do I call temperature? Well, it's going to try and call this method, and then you can see these things are not the same thing. So I assume this is meant to refer to the variable. So let's fix that. Undefined method var for main object. So I can see here there's like this keyword var for some reason, but it doesn't really exist because this is not JavaScript, and it's not even old JavaScript. So we're just going to remove this. We don't need that keyword in Ruby. Let's test. So then we have string can't be coerced into integer plus. So then we have to think about, okay, at what point is this happening? This looks like it's happening here. So in order to start seeing what's happening, let's try and have a look here. So I'm going to use the other tool that I have at my disposal, which is like logging. So using some of the printing methods in Ruby. I always like to use p as the method, and you can look up the different methods. There's puts, print, and p as the main logging methods in Ruby. Okay, so let's start logging. always like to name my logging statements. I always have like interpolated strings, so I can like actually make sure I know what's what. Cool. So the first example is when it's 50, when C is 50. So then it looks like I should get down to this line. I'm just going to keep this out for the moment. So in this example, it's 56. Oh, it's because I think I pressed the attempt button rather than just these test buttons by mistake. Cool. So we should still be on 50. Yes. String can't be coerced into integer. So it's trying to say that this something's happening here. The understanding that I have is that it's trying to do an integer add a string. It has like no idea what to do. So let's double check that. So the way that I can do this is just by having a look at what thing it is. You can see it's an integer. So when we try and do an integer add a string, it doesn't quite work. But what we want to do is turn it into a string. So we do string add string, and string add string is called concatenation. We get to add strings together, just essentially like append items, strings to another string. So there are a couple of ways I can go about this. An easy fix could be just to turn it to a string first, but maybe instead I could return the temperature as a string down here. So it means every time I call this method, C will always be a string. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe I could do it after the result. So keep this always as an integer, and just return and change the value up here. So let's just see whether that gets us the next error. So we have a comparison error. Comparison of string with 0 failed. So it says here, I tried to compare a string with 0. So so it looks like I can't do it here. It looks like what I should do is do it in here. So let's just do it here for now. Not trying to be too sneaky. My habit is to go Command S, which runs all the test, rather than just click the test button. Okay. So a little bit further. We've got the comparison going, so we can still compare integer to integer, and then we turn the integer into a string, and then concatenate with another string. So then the error message that I get is just a different number. It just doesn't like it. So after that, let's just have a look at what's going on. It looks like at the moment we've got to the point where we've solved some of the actual typos and mistakes, and now we have to actually look at the logic and just double check like what's actually happening and is it happening the right way. So let's start off the first one, for example, and I can see here that we've got 50, and the first result is 50, and then the next one I got 23, and the first input was 23. So it looks like the input to output just doesn't change. Whatever is the input, we just get the output. And if you look through it, you can actually probably see why. And it's in this method here, convert to Celsius. It says we put in this argument, and we try and run some kind of equation here and store it in this local variable. But then we didn't do anything with the variable. We just return back to the temperature. So my first step is just going to change this. Before I do that, let's just verify that. So let's just say, I'm going to use this line. and uncomment it and say this is Celsius. Ooh. And that is Celsius. And the next one will be temperature. So always get in the habit of just verifying. Cool. So you can see here that Celsius actually has a different number to the temperature, and that's what I want to be returning. So let's just return Celsius. Remember, in Ruby, we actually don't need explicit return, so let's just remove that. Okay, so we still aren't. I'm actually going to remove these logging statements for the moment, or there's just this one. So we're still not getting the right numbers. Let me just test that again. Always, any change you make, just keep running your tests. So I'm getting numbers, but not the right numbers. So I've got 18 when I should have got 10. So this means just there's a mistake with our equation. So let's have a look at this. Let's go back to the instructions. Yeah, you can see it's like there are two mistakes, right? One is this also might be easier if we just call it Fahrenheit, because that's really what it is, isn't it? It makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so what we really should be doing is saying Fahrenheit minus 32 in brackets, and then not plus, but multiply. Cool. So then you can see for some reason that we have got 0, just 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then we have to have a look at why, what's going on. So let's put in another line of logging. Just say let's have a look at what this is. So we're doing the Fahrenheit first and then the Celsius. So we put in Fahrenheit and we get out Celsius. So then the question becomes, so why does it always give us 0? So we have some verification. We're on the right line. That's line 15. That's just erroring and not doing as expected. So let's just dive into it a little bit and keep logging. Remember, never try to think too much. Just try to keep logging. So in my evaluation little string thing, I'm going to have a look at this expression first. And then I'm going to have a look at this. That'd be nice to know. And then let's do the thing together. That's always like to do. Just break it into parts and just see what's going on. Now I already know what's going on, but that's not the point. Okay, so let's just try and make sense of this. So my first line is the Fahrenheit input 50, and then I do 50 minus 32, 18, and then I do 5 divided by 9, and I get 0. So Ruby does integer division, which means when it tries to divide two integers, it will return whatever is the integer with no remainder, right? So 5 divided by 9 doesn't give you an integer, it just gives you a decimal. But because we're doing integer division, it just gives you 0. So instead, the quick way to fix this is just to turn one of them into a float. A float's just a fancy name for a decimal, really. So let's see what happens when we do that. You can see that it does actually allow the decimal division to happen. So let's change, now that we've understood that, let's change this to a float. So, cool, we're almost there. Look at this. We're getting expected 10.0, instead got 10.0. Now you can see that the string is not what we want. So There's still some condition here that we have to change. 10 is above freezing temperature. So if it's greater than 0, we say it's above. Otherwise, we say is freezing temperature. Cool. So we solved those ones, but let's just run the whole test. Sweet. And we're good. We're good. So let's just clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to remove all my logs. Beam, 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 beam. And we also don't need to return this like we're doing, so we could just keep those brackets just for clarity. Let's return that. Ooh. So expected 0.0 is above freezing temperature. Instead I got 0.0 is freezing temperature. So maybe we should do let's double check this one. Expected 0 is above. I guess so. Doesn't really make sense. For me, 0 should be freezing, but there we are. What else could we do? Anything? I guess we don't need the return statement. And really, we can just interpolate it. So just go something like this. Because that will turn it into a string anyway. Oh. Cool. Is there anything else that you think I could do? That looks about good. That looks good. We're done. Stop. Just stop working. Stop. Okay.